Smiley face. Am I going to talk about emojis? I don't know. But I did a book called The Story of Emoji, and I guess you can buy the book, so I don't really feel I should talk about it. I've brain dumped all of that information into a very accessible format, which has got pages and pictures and words and stuff, and I'm really proud of it. Normally, when because I work on books, by this sort of stage it comes out, and I kind of never want to work on a book again, but I feel really good about this. So there. That's what it looks like. I've just showed you it, but there is a really big... why did I write a book on emoji? Because I write books. I used to work for Creative Revue magazine, which when I started back in 2001 was a monthly magazine, and we didn't really use the internet. We used the telephone to call up people to find out what was going on in the world. And that really suited me, working on a monthly sort of cycle of producing something physical. And then the month after we went to press, we could actually read other journals and spend time in people's studios or go around to ad agencies and spend time with creatives and find out what's going on. So whilst I find digital media brilliant and exciting and wouldn't change it for the world, digital journalism is just not for me, basically. I really like long-form projects and feeling like I'm collaborating with people, whether it's a designer or a topic, and yeah, making things. So how did this particular project come about, and how did I go about sort of working out what was going to go in the book? I worked on this book with illustrator, you might know, graphic designer Kate Moras. And when I worked on that with her, I worked with Prestel Publishing, and the commissioning editor there, Ali Gitlow, is mega awesome and just super switched on. She's the kind of person that is just great to work with. And when we finished working on Kate's book and went out and got absolutely hammered, we sort of decided that we'd love to work again on something together. And just before Kate's book came out, she called me up and said, "Emoji." And I said, "Who is this?" And she said, "It's me, Ali, and emoji. What do you think about emoji?" And I said, "Well, it's the evolution of the dingbat." And she said, "What?" I said, "Dingbats, non-alphabetical characters or glyphs such as asterisks, arrows, and other symbols potentially of use to a typographer or graphic designer and gathered together in fonts so you can access them via your keyboard. You know, like Zap Dingbats or Wingdings." And she didn't say anything. So I tried to explain that basically a couple of years previously I'd written researched and written a piece for Creative Revue called about the history of the dingbat, which I've just explained what a dingbat is. But this is kind of what I worked out, or what I think I worked out, is that this is the origin of the dingbat. In the early days of printing, printers would create extra bits of type, decorative type, a bit like this, and they'd arrange them in such a way to make things like this. And yeah, graphic design, apparently, this is what it is. And so I did a load of research into that, and this is some other dingbats, and I'm going to try and explain why I think emoji is a sort of evolution of the dingbat. So this is a very handy dingbat font called Warning Pi, where you can use to warn people that Boba Fett is somewhere in the building, or that there's a very full glass of wine. Watch out for that, it's a hazard. You can have poison next to it if it is poison. Hopefully it is a very full glass of wine, in which case, no cause for alarm. This is another dingbat font by a sort of serial typographer and sort of designer of typefaces. He's an illustrator as well, Rian Hughes. I hope that's how you pronounce his name. Otherwise, I've been embarrassing myself in phone calls to him over the last 10 years. But this was designed especially for the Radio Times, and it's pretty obvious why. And it's much handier to have that in as a font, as something that you can type, rather than a folder full of vector files that you have to fool around with and resize when you're doing layouts. So this is the sort of dingbat that makes me think that dingbats and emoji are sort of linked. This is Wingdings, which Microsoft sort of published, if that's the right word. They released as a system font in 1990. And it actually gathers the symbols from 2 other fonts by people whose names I forget, but they're in the book. And so all of that thinking essentially turned into the first chapter in the Story of Emoji, the evolution of the dingbat, and there you can see those 2 things together. I guess it seems a bit of a leap to have color emoji and sort of think of dingbats were always single color sort of type things. But actually, as you'll see later, emoji, when they first emerged, were just one color and very, very simple glyphs. What else am I going to put in this book? As I pondered that question, the question mark itself seemed like something worth thinking about, because now that we have emoji and these sort of characters to help us express ourselves in short communication, it seems astonishing that the English language only has two characters that allow us to intonate or express. There's a question mark, which helps us know that a particular sentence we're reading is in fact a question, and we should intonate it, which of course you can't do. And that fellow, you know what it is. Expressive punctuation. So I started looking into this. There's a really, really good book by somebody whose name I've completely forgotten, but it's really good. It's in my book. But he did some exhaustive research into expressive punctuation, and that turned into this spread in the book. Yeah, let me talk about these things. So up there on the top right, the reverse question mark was called a percontation point, and that was devised by an English printer in 1580, an Elizabethan printer and writer and philosopher who used it a lot. And the idea was that he could denote rhetoric in his writing by using this in certain sentences, or questions that didn't need answering. Are they even questions? Anyway, so some more expressive punctuation. The irony mark, another Englishman proposed that, John Wilkins. He was the brother-in-law of Oliver Cromwell. I remembered something from my book. And he devised that in 1668 in a whole book where he tried to invent a new language that could replace Latin as the language for scientific discourse. It's a work of genius that nobody read or paid any attention to, but he did devise that, the irony mark, which I like. It's the inverted exclamation mark. It kind of looks like an eye. Well done. I like the love point, which was devised by a French guy, Hervé Bazin, in 1966, and it kind of is a very obvious precursor to the love heart emoji, to question marks sharing the same point. The interrobang, brilliantly named, is devised by an ad man, Martin K. Spector, in 1966. It's kind of pointless because we've got a question mark and an exclamation mark, so you can just put them together. But no, one glyph to do that, and nobody's used it. The irony tekken, which is the wibbly exclamation mark, it was designed much more recently by Bas Jacobs of Dutch Type Foundry Underwear. And nobody's used that either. It could be because it looks a bit like the Nazi SS logo when you put them together. Whoops. This one was more interesting. This is by an American typographer, Charles Cunningham, and this was his snark mark, and it's a full stop followed by a tilde. I still don't know if I'm saying that right, but this is interesting because it's two glyphs that are readily available on most keyboards that are combined to form a new meaning, a specific meaning, and that, to me, sort of made sense as a precursor to emoticons. Now, emoticons and emoji, they're the same word, right? They're completely interchangeable. No, they're not. An emoticon is a combination of typographic characters that look like a face when viewed sideways. All emoticons are comprised of a combination of readily available and familiar typographic marks and symbols, whereas An emoji, or the word emoji, comes from the Japanese words for picture, e, and character, moji. An emoji is a picture that should be legible when used as small as a typographic character. And I just wanted to make that point because I've heard people say, yeah, I'm devising a whole series of emoticons for a client, and they're not at all. They're just talking rubbish. So this emoticons, I started becoming interested in where do emoticons come from, or when do they come from? And this is the first known use of emoticons, deliberate use of emoticons in digital communication. It was an email in 1982 from an American computer scientist in a university in America. Again, totally forgotten which university, but he sent that. There's proof, because I made that illustration, so it definitely happened. And that was in 1982, and he believes that he invented that. He very strongly believes that, rightly or wrongly. But this exists, and this is a page from Puck magazine from 1881. So screw you, Mr. University guy. And this is great. I love this. This is so it's the tone of this little piece as well, which is great. I don't know what the wider social context of this, whether there was some argument between the editor and art director and an illustrator, but this is great. For fear of startling the public, we will give only a small specimen of the artistic achievements within our grasp. Yeah, and there you go. They're made using, all the things that we used to make emoticons. 1881. Fancy that. And then I had to mention Cowmoji, which are Eastern emoticons, not emoji. And they've got a much wider range of bizarre typographics or furniture to make emoticons, which you don't have to turn your head sideways to read, which is handy. And then I had to mention this when looking at the history of emoji. It's the smiley face, the smiley. That's it. I love that guy. He was actually designed, I found out, by a guy called Harvey Ball in 1963. He was a commercial illustrator, and he got paid like $35 to make this guy when two insurance companies merged, which was very boring. And everybody was like, so what? And so they said, if we have something really happy, then all our staff can look at it when they're going, yeah, we've merged, and now we've got a new name and stuff. Have a nice day. And so that's where all of that comes from. And Acid House was inevitably going to follow that. So emoji, what about emoji? How are we going to get them in the book? So where do emoji come from, and why? Yeah, why? Well, they're from Japan. That's why. Based on those two Japanese words I mentioned earlier. And at this point, I have to big up Jeff. He's my friend, and I said I'd mention him. No, Jeff Blagden is... he's not my friend. I've never met him. But we have spoken. And he's a journalist, and he wrote a piece in 2013 for an online magazine that was called How Emoji Conquered the World. And the research that he did for that piece and the interviews he did and everything was so good that I couldn't just paraphrase it and put it in the book and pass it off as my own research. So I got in touch with him and said, Jeff, buddy, let's work together. Let's do this. And so a version of that piece that he wrote appears in my book. And thank you, Jeff. But I'm going to boil down his research to this, which is a pager with some heart symbols. In 1995, a Japanese service provider added a heart symbol to its Pocket Bell pages, which allowed Japanese teenagers to imbue their text messages with a cuteness other pages simply couldn't match. But when Docomo then abandoned the heart icon in favor of more business-minded symbols, teenagers abandoned the service provider, and they realized too late the power of the teenage market, so it needed a new killer app. And what it came up with was emoji. And they were invented by this guy, who's just hoved into view on a boat. Wicked. But this is, so Shigetaka Kurita created these in the late 90s. 1999 is when they were first released. There was 176 emoji characters originally, and they were devised at a time when the internet and mobile phones were starting to sort of happen at the same time. and mobile phone screens are very crude, and he wanted a way to make the internet a more exciting place on really sort of shit screens, basically. So he drew a penguin and a cat and smiley faces and musical notes and hearts and pencils and thumbs up and all kinds of stuff. And when you look at this, I think it's slightly easier to see the sort of connection between dingbat typefaces and emoji. That's where I'm going with this. I'm massively over time. I'm really sorry, so I'm gonna stop soon. So this is, I could have just shown you this. This is my timeline of, this is where we've got to. So from Mr. Denham's percontation point in the 1580s, expressive punctuation, printers, flowers, those emoticons, typographical art in Puck magazine, Martin K. Spector's Interrobang, that dude on his computer, there he is. The heart on the pages, Shigetaka Kurita's early emoji, the first emoji series. Apple then in 2011. Well, in 2010, the Unicode consortium basically included the code for emoji, which allowed people to use them on different platforms. And then Apple came out with a keyboard in 2011. That's when the shit blew up. And here's some spreads from my, oh, hey, slow down. Some spreads from my book. There's more in the book than just those spreads, but I didn't want to go crazy. There's lots of content, basically, lots of people using emojis in their projects, artists, brands, advertising agencies, photographers, all kinds of people, and there's a large range of projects from all over the world that kind of harness the power of emoji for artistic reasons, for wanting to connect with a certain demographic, and all that kind of stuff. And at that juncture, I think, yeah, I'm going to, oh, shall I stop? Shall I stop now? Shall I stop? It's about to get interesting. I'm going to whiz through these very quickly. So in the very last section of the book, I asked a bunch of illustrators, designers, and all-round nice people, if you could create an emoji, what would it be and why? And I'm not going to go into the why because that would just be crazy. But I am going to show you, I'm just going to flick through them. So Liza Nelson in LA loves bacon, what can I tell you? So, and then Hey Studio in Barcelona, love coffee. Matthew Bromley, London-based illustrator, loves skateboarding. Rob Flowers, also based in London, illustrator, wanted a heavy pencil for his diary for saying, yeah, let's go skateboarding. Why isn't there a fingers crossed emoji in the... There is now. Thank you, David Henkel. He's the artist who did that. Tane Williams in New Zealand. Rock on. Vinyl emoji. There's a mini disc emoji, but there isn't a vinyl emoji. Crazy. Ghetto Blaster. Maybe there's a legitimate reason why there isn't one of those, but that's by Crispin Finn, as is the gramophone. Volume turned up to 11 with crazy moire effect, which, if you look at it in the book, it looks much better. Beer, also by Tane Williams, and Fuck Bunnies. Awkward. That is by 2 Point Studio in Germany. And if you've accidentally sent the fuck bunnies, that's the whoops, typo emoji by Peskimo, based in Bristol. Or if you're a bit more of a graphic designer, you could use the Command Z undo emoji by Matt Chase. Or if you're just rude, like a certain Mr. Bingo, then that could be a handy emoji for you. And if you're rude but quite polite as well, then it's good to have the Just Kidding by Friso Blankevert in Amsterdam. That's by Noma Bar. Oh shit. Brought to beautiful conclusion. That's Mind Blown emoji by Flat33, who designed my book. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Cheers.